Hi everyone, welcome to Maximum Attack Rallying and to your Monday dose of rallying chit chat. We have had a dramatic few days. So former WRC co-driver Robert Reid has resigned his position as Deputy President for Sport at the FIA. This obviously has ramifications across the motorsport spectrum, but it's particularly poignant for us rally fans, as obviously Robert Reid sat alongside the late Richard Burns, and he and President Mohammed Ben Sulayem stood on a platform of revitalising the WRC and rallying, so it's particularly galling for us, perhaps, obviously seeing this dramatic turn of events. So I just want to talk about that a little bit, talk about what's happening, why things have gone on the way they have, and what might happen next. So let's get right into it. Let's start by reading Robert Reid's statement. He has spoken to a few media outlets, but I will read you the statement that he put out on social media, because that basically covers all of the bases. So Reid said, "After deep reflection, I have made the difficult decision to resign as FIA Deputy President for Sport. I took on this role to help deliver greater transparency, stronger governance, and more collaborative leadership. Over time, those principles have been increasingly set aside, and I can no longer, in good faith, remain part of a system that no longer reflects them. Stepping away was not easy, however, staying would have meant compromising what I believe in. This is about principles, not politics. Motorsport deserves leadership rooted in integrity, accountability, and respect for process. That's the minimum standard we should all expect and demand." Strong words then, strong words. And while it wasn't, he didn't mention the president by name, it was clearly a dig at Ben Sulayem, who has been increasingly criticised for his allegedly autocratic approach to running the FIA, with decisions being made behind closed doors and not following due process. So, you could ask the question about whether Reid was right to leave his position. And, we don't know all of the details of what's gone on, particularly between Reid and Ben Sulayem himself. But I think if you look at the things that have been happening publicly, there does seem to be an increasing level of disquiet, and one of the big examples of that in recent months was that Reid was barred from attending a World Motorsport Council meeting along with David Richards, the chairman of Motorsport UK, because they both refused to sign an updated non-disclosure agreement that they said was not in line with the procedures and values of the FIA. And it seems to be those issues of governance that have ultimately pushed Reid out of the door. So he's talked about, how there's been a number of changes in the way that things have been done and how things are not following the processes and the governance structure that has been put in place and that kind of sits at the heart of how the FIA operates. And not only that, he has also said that some of those changes in process could even be illegal, and it was that kind of pushed him over the edge. So Ben Sulayem kind of paved the way for the World Rallycross Championship to be brought back into the control of the FIA, so they will hold the commercial rights. And Reid believes that that is actually in contravention not just of FIA rules, which apparently state that no commercial rights to any championship should be held by the FIA, which is part of its agreement with Formula One and that. So he believes that this change is against European laws and goes very much against the principles of the FIA. And that was, he said, the final straw, and that is what pushed him to make the decision to leave his position. So I think this is probably a time for reflection, isn't it? With Reid walking out of the door, we've got elections, re-election potentially for the president in December. So this is maybe should prompt some reflection. As I said at the top, this affects motorsport across the spectrum. But I think as rally fans, we're selfish, aren't we? We want to know what's happening with us, and it's worth remembering that by viewing figures, WRC is the second biggest global motorsport behind F1. So it is really significant. And I think given that Ben Sulayem and Reid, as I said, kind of came into this saying that they were going to change things and promising lots of action in terms of rallying, and both come with credentials, don't they? Ben Sulayem is a 14-time Middle East champion. Reid won the WRC alongside Richard Burns. We had high expectations, didn't we? And I think ultimately those expectations were probably misplaced. That isn't necessarily a direct criticism of them, because I think anyone, unfortunately, that becomes the FIA president is inevitably going to be dragged into all of the politics of F1, aren't they? And all of the circus that comes with that, and it ends up just taking up most of their time, because that seems to be the way of things, sadly. So we've had that to contend with, but saying that there has been plenty of controversy, hasn't there? Even if you look into F1, Ben Sulayem has not necessarily been viewed as a positive figure. He's had allegations of interference with races, and then we've had all the swearing nonsense which has spilled over into WRC as well. So there's been lots of negativity in that respect. But let's just have a look at rallying in more detail, because I think this is a sign of perhaps how concerned we should be for the future. So what has happened since 2021, when they were elected in WRC terms? So we had Rally 1 introduced, didn't we, at the start of 2022. That had obviously been in the works for some time, so I don't think we can necessarily blame them for that. But look at the trajectory since then. So we've had lots of up and down with the regulations, haven't we? So at one point we were going to get rid of hybrid, and then at one point we were going to go to Rally 2, and then at one point we were going to keep hybrid again, and then we ditched hybrid. So we've had all these ups and downs and misdirection in terms of regulation. We still don't know what the 2027 regulations look like, even though we're only 20 months from those new cars apparently driving over the start ramp at Monte Carlo. 20 months sounds like a long time, but if you're a manufacturer looking to join the championship, it is not very long at all. You would want at least a year to get ready. So we don't have very long until that. We've got this controversial deal was signed, wasn't it, with Saudi Arabia for a 10-year slot on the WRC calendar. That doesn't bother me too much personally. I think it was an interesting change of direction, and it is, in a way, you could argue it's nice to see some stability, but it has upset a lot of people, so we have to mention it, don't we? And we've got lots of discontent among the drivers. Thierry Neuville has talked about this in the last few days. I saw another interview that he did, again being critical of the FIA, saying they're not listening, and just again, desperately looking for clarity. Neuville is probably better placed than anyone to comment on this, because if Hyundai do indeed leave the championship, then he has no seat. So, I think he knows more than anyone the seriousness of what's going on. And, what's more concerning is that if Hyundai go, publicly there is no interest from another manufacturer. We haven't seen anyone suggesting that they would like to join in 2027. And if we go into another regulation cycle with no new manufacturers, I think we have to ask serious questions about the direction of travel, whether this Rally 1 style space frame is the thing that we want. If you look at this in the context of other sports, both Formula 1 and the World Endurance Championship are attracting manufacturers. Cadillac have gone into, or will be going into F1. They're attracting engine manufacturers. Ford have gone in with support for Red Bull. Honda have come back despite leaving, so we are seeing interest from manufacturers there. If you look at World Endurance, Aston Martin, Ferrari, Genesis, lots and lots of interest in those championships. So it does beg the question, what is the WRC doing wrong? And that is a reflection directly, unfortunately, on the FIA and by extension its leadership. So I think there are major questions there. There have been some good things. This isn't just me bashing the FIA. We've enjoyed good competition over the last few years. There have been improvements to the TV coverage, so there have been steps. But crucially, I think the manufacturer thing and the regulation thing is the biggest issue, and potentially could leave us facing a crisis. If Hyundai go, we could be facing a serious downturn for the sport, and that is a major thing. And as I said, the FIA are ultimately responsible for that, along with the WRC promoter. So big issues that we're facing, and lots of questions to be asked about where we're at. But I think the other question we need to ask is, what happens next? Where do we go from here? And I think one of the things that's been amusing / surprising / unsurprising probably is that Ben Sulayem just seems to be carrying on as normal. His social media channels have still been sharing content, and it's like nothing has happened. And while he might not have addressed that criticism directly from Reid, he could have maybe said, thank you for your service or something of that note, but it seems that isn't his style. I didn't see the Formula 1 Bahrain Grand Prix over the weekend. He was apparently going to be there for his first race visit of the year. I haven't found anything about any comments that he made if he was there. So if you did see something, put it in the comments below. I'd like to know if he said anything. Meanwhile, Reid's departure seems to have drawn out some other criticism from some other people. So the former CEO, Natalie Robin, she told Autosport in the last few days that this lack of governance, this lack of following procedure was also why she left her position last year. So that is, you know, further evidence against the current regime. And David Richards of Motorsport UK, he has continued his public criticism over the last few weeks with that ongoing issues around him not being allowed to attend that World Motorsport Council meeting. Just sticking with Richards for a second, some people have suggested that he should stand against Ben Sulayem. It's an interesting concept. Obviously, he comes with lots of experience, but it is not actually possible because he is too old. There is a 70-year age cap on the position, and I think he's 72, so that rules him out. Would a Motorsport UK official be a good addition and make a good FIA president? I think many people in the UK might disagree with that. I think there is always a certain level of discontent with Motorsport UK, some of it justified, some of it perhaps not, but yeah, I don't want to get into that. That's a different video, isn't it? The other question is perhaps whether Reid would stand himself. I'm not sure that seems likely. Would he want to put himself in that position? You know, I think it would be a bit of a political bloodbath, wouldn't it, for him to have walked out of the door and then directly stand against his former running mate, if you will. I'm not sure he'd do that. I think he might just take a bit of a step back and then find some different ways to get involved in other areas. So I'm not sure I see that. It would certainly be explosive if he did so, though, so it would make for good viewing. Right now, no one has said publicly that they are going to stand against Ben Sulayem in December, but do not expect that to continue. I think with the growing discontent, we will see someone stand against him. Whether they can win is a different question. We don't know whether Ben Sulayem still has, you know, a large enough base to fend off any would-be challenger. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. All I will say is that if we do get someone new, please, 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 I just want them to fix rallying. Let's inject some common sense into the WRC. Let's bring in some sensible regulations and a sensible direction and try and do something to finally bring in some new manufacturers so that we can be a bit more positive about the future. Because right now, it just feels like with all this hybrid coming and going nonsense, it just feels like things have been a little bit chaotic. And wouldn't it be nice to have some stability and sensible direction and all that stuff? So do let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. I hope that rambling overview was useful, and we'll see what happens, won't we? We will see what happens over the coming months, especially in case of rallying, where we get hopefully get some sensible regulations and hopefully a few manufacturers announce that they're interested. So make sure you do follow me over on socials as always and hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you again next time.